I work with men specifically on creating long-lasting transformation, specifically in the areas of health and wellness, mental health, emotional health, etc., and in stepping into their masculinity to live a life that's more their life, their terms. Discover how to actually attain deep inner peace. Discover how to actually move through emotions instead of suppressing them. And how to, when you're stressed out, control the nervous system. When you're feeling negative, how to turn that into positive. But we create our reality by our inner state. That's really the name of the game here. And that's the goal. That's the goal of mental health, is mastering your inner state.
Wanted to say thanks again for joining us, Carl, and just give you a chance to introduce yourself and tell the listeners a little bit more about you and what it is that you do.
Yeah. So my name is Karl Lashkari, and I'm a men's coach. I work with men specifically on creating long-lasting transformation, specifically in the areas of health and wellness, mental health, emotional health, etc., and in stepping into their masculinity to live a life that's more their life, their terms.
How did you get started doing coaching? Was it through, work that you're already doing, people just asking you questions? What was that transition like?
About 4 years ago. So I was previously working in hedge funds and then in management consulting. And then I came down with a chronic illness, which I would have intense fatigue, body aches, memory issues, basically completely disabled. And before that, I was working 80-hour weeks, very successful as a management consultant, but essentially crashed out. And I was pretty much bedbound mostly for about 8 months, and then semi-disabled for about 3 years. And that got me on a track of self-development, personal development, biohacking, etc., because a lot of people who had the condition that I had have it for their whole life. And the medical system really didn't have very many answers for me. So I had to kind of take matters into my own hands and pretty much drop everything, stop working, stop relationships, stop everything, and focus on healing myself and optimizing myself. And that brought me onto the journey of self-optimization, which put me in a few different directions: health and wellness, relationships, sexuality, everything. And I learned so much about the human mind, human emotions, human nervous system, human body, that it really became my calling to pay that forward in a variety of ways.
What was the learning process? Was it reading books? Was it just self-exploration? What walk me through? I mean, obviously you had some downtime, but what was that process like?
Yeah. I had downtime, but at the beginning I only had about 30 minutes a day where I was available to read or I couldn't listen to a song. I couldn't watch a movie. I couldn't, because there was so much light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, everything.
Okay.
So most of my time was in a dark room, just staring, sleeping about 12 to 13 hours a day. When I did start to get a little bit of energy, I think I started with picking up a meditation book and reading a little bit about meditation. I'd done it a little bit before, and that was just like the start. And then it turned into reading about meditation, reading about the power of breath, reading about nutrition. And it wasn't all reading. I had a lot of support systems. I had holistic doctors. I had coaches, and I'm someone who really believes in taking the bull by its horn, which was a challenge for this one because perseverance was not what this needed. Surrender was what this needed. But I had multiple coaches. I did coaching programs, conferences, as well as reading. So variety of ways.
Being in that position, it's easy to kind of wallow in self-pity. What was it that like kind of made you think, no, I want to figure out how to actually come out better from this?
No, I mean, don't get me wrong. I had my moments of self-pity. I had my moments like really, really wondering how I can be in this life, how I can make it work, all of it, but I knew I'm someone who has overcome quite a few things: loss of family members, being overweight, losing weight. I feel like I've done a lot of transformations, and I told myself that this would be the greatest one yet. This would be one that I think what motivated me was obviously not wanting to be disabled for the rest of my life is a big motivator, and also wanting to pass it forward. I'm not necessarily proud of that, but I know I'm wired that way, that I was told myself that if I can find answers to this, I can help so many people and I can really create something out of this. And, that was a motivator too.
No, that's pretty cool. Pretty popular right now, this subject of mental health and especially like masculinity. What is the goal that you try and give your clients or people you're talking to? Because I think about it like you kind of touched on it, and that you had moments of lowness, right? People think that when you're
Yeah.
mentally strong or mentally healthy, that it's almost you should always be happy or something like that. And
Yeah.
that and
Yeah.
that's not really going to be the case. So what is it that you kind of get people to strive for that would be a goal when working with you?
So essentially the goal is mental health for even if we're talking like I do relationship coaching, but the
Okay.
goal is still mental health. And even in business, the goal is mental health. And I'll expand on what I mean by that. And it's really the ability, we have a lot of high potential as humans. And in the society that we live in right now, with all the TVs and the iPads and the phones and, you know, the rules too, we're not living up to that potential. And what I help people do is discover their fullest potential, discover how to actually attain deep inner peace, discover how to actually move through emotions instead of suppressing them, and how to, when you're stressed out, control the nervous system. When you're feeling negative, how to turn that into positive. And when you're able to master your inner state, and that's the goal. That's the goal of mental health, is mastering your inner state. When you're able to master your inner state and not be a consequence to what's happening in the world. Oh no, I got fired at work. My life is over. Mind tanks, emotions tank, stress tanks. But we create our reality by our inner state. That's really the name of the game here. And when it comes to everything I just mentioned, inner state, that's part of the mental health equation. And then the second part is owning our masculinity. And I've seen this with men and women in terms of owning women's femininity, that there is a huge mental health component to it. There really is. When we're able to be in certain energies, for men specifically, it's energies of leadership, it's energies of commanding respect, it's energies of being of service, it's energies of being at our highest potential. When we're able to be at those energies, it takes a lot of pressure off of us. And same with the women, when a feminine woman is able to be in her emotions, when she's able to be in the moment, in her flow, there's a mental health component. But because modern day society is trying to shut down all differences and all things which make us primal, all things that are in nature as animals that we are in some way, we have a thinking ability, a prefrontal cortex that differentiates us from other animals, but we still have biological, chemical, hormonal things. And by really just understanding what they are within us, understanding what they are in the opposite gender as well, and creating a dance and creating a flow with that higher level of awareness.
How do you, I want to stick to I guess the masculinity side for a second. How do you define that? Because I think that's something too that's become on both sides of it, where it's like taboo to talk about it because you don't want to identify to one side. But then on
Yeah.
the far extreme, it becomes this oppressive nature towards the
Yeah.
opposite sex. You know what I mean? So for you, what is that defined as?
Yeah. I'll actually pull up something I wrote down because I was thinking about this just the other day. Yeah, so to answer your question, I do agree that there's an imbalance here. On one hand, we have people, on, let's say, more the feminist side, what's been going on for the last 20 years, saying that all masculinity is bad, all masculinity is toxic, and therefore disconnect to a core essence of a man, something that's core within us. And then on the other hand, you have, I don't know if you're familiar with the red pill community, but that's more of the Andrew Tate and internet famous male influencers coming out who are swinging to the complete other side of trying to take things back to the 60s, 70s, 80s. And I actually think it's a combination of both. I think that where men were at in the 80s, let's say 70s, 80s, was pretty valuable in terms of owning our power, owning our leadership, owning our need to be respected. But what we needed was a little more emotional intelligence, a little more intuition, a little more ability to speak a woman's language, which is all through emotions. And that's something that I teach a lot of people in my programs, in my circles, is okay, let's own your strength, let's own your power, let's own your truth, because that's your masculine nature as a man. But let's evolve masculinity beyond just what it used to be into bringing in emotional intelligence, into bringing in instinct, which is actually the language of the feminine. And then that's how you create that bridge. Where I'm seeing the red pill movement, which is the men's empowerment movement, that's, let's say, hot on the internet right now. Where I'm seeing that fail is it's not teaching men how to actually connect within the masculinity within themselves or this emotional intelligence. It's telling them make money, get in the gym, have game. And I'm not against those things, but I think those things are a consequence of being a masculine man and not going to make you a masculine man. So you make that money, you go to the gym, you get that, all that, you have game, you can flirt with women. And if you're still superficial, you're still superficial. I don't know if I can say this, but you're still an asshole, you're still an asshole. And yeah, cool. And that's where I think they're missing the mark. They're missing the mark in having men understand for themselves what it means to be masculine and instead following an idol. And that's a really dangerous game to play. I want to be like this guy with the superpowers, and I want to be like that guy. But you're still doing it by taking shortcuts. You're still doing it by not being a loving leader. You're still doing it by maybe torturing yourself and working 18-hour days instead of actually what I teach is work smarter. Like, don't hustle. Don't get lost in menial tasks. So instead of doing the inner work to be a better man, they just try and do all the superficial things. And where the biggest area this misses the mark is a lot of these men do become successful, but then they're just attracting superficial women. And they're saying all women are gold diggers, all women are hoes, all women are this and that, because they've now built themselves to be a superficial man. And guess what? They're going to attract a superficial woman.
Well, no, that's powerful. And I always, I just find it interesting that they talk about, like, that movement talks a lot about discipline and things like that, where it's, you got to be in the right mindset to be disciplined, to go to the gym, to be disciplined in your work. But there was always a disconnect for me where it's like, well, then why is there no discipline when it comes to a monogamous relationship or something like that? Where I've found that, my wife has been a tremendous impact on my life. Not necessarily, I've never had this desire to be like, well, I need to have 10 wives and that would show that I'm more of a man. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think for me personally, that's your mileage may vary type situation. I think that there are certain men who truly, truly thrive off of, intimacy, honeymoon periods, etc. And there are some men who are just undisciplined. So I think for some men, it's their nature to be more polygamous, and others, it's not their nature, but more of a Hollywood thing. And that's a key distinction. But that is a good point you make around discipline, though. Just in general, not even around the monogamy situation, but I think a lot of these red pill people are actually, they're preaching discipline, but how do I say this? They're preaching discipline, but they're actually embodying motivation. So do you understand what I mean about the distinction between discipline and motivation?
I do, but if you want to expand on it, I'd be happy to.
So for me, discipline is feeling all the emotions you need to feel, feeling the emotional attachments that come through, feeling any neediness that comes through, anything that really, again, is tied to emotion, and quieting the volume on that, and then really asking, what does the moment need? So, even something as simple as go to the gym every day. As someone who's gone through all these health issues, I've realized that it's not necessarily a disciplined thing to do, to be like, you know what, no matter what, I got to get up and go to the gym. I feel like shit. I've brain fog today. I feel awful. I got to go to the gym. Like, sometimes going to the gym makes me feel worse, but I can have the discipline to say, all right, I'm waking up. What do I need right now? Okay, today I'm exhausted. I actually need a meditation. Today I feel some brain fog. I need to make sure I eat good nutrition. And when my energy then is high, I'll go to the gym. And the motivation is no matter what, do it. No matter what, do it. Rah, 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 rah. And I think that's really confusing because you can burn out. I think that all of these things is not associating that you can burn out. You can, make your health worse. And that's the motivation which drives you to do that. But the discipline is actually asking about yourself always, what is the thing I need the most right now? And since you did talk about monogamy, I'm happy to share that. Oh, a feminine woman will lose her respect for an undisciplined man. There's no ways around that. And it could mean him not being monogamous, or it could even be the opposite. It could be a man whose true truth is that he needs some sort of open container. And of course, expressing it with his woman, creating an agreement, everything consensual, of course. But you'll be surprised at some women who respect men who actually live by his truth and what he needs, even if it's having to shift the container around and like, okay, maybe once every few months I get to, or maybe we bring another woman into the relationship. Like, there's no right or wrong. And if a man is monogamous by nature, but he's going out and hooking up with other women because it's an urge, she'll feel that too. So what a woman wants to feel is a man is in integrity with his truth. He's grounded, he's non-reactive, he's not in emotion or impulse, but he is in integrity with his truth. So therefore, if he does need something slightly altered in the relationship, he can speak it, she can agree to it, and he can be consistent with it. And that can be very calming for a woman as well. And for a woman who wants a man to claim her, who wants monogamy, who wants lifelong, that if he promises that to her, that he can live by it, that it shows up in his actions, that his eyes aren't wandering, that, those sort of things. So it's really at a deeper level. It's not about necessarily even being faithful, but it's more about being in integrity. And being in integrity means what you believe, who you are, what you speak, and how you act are all always on the same path.
Is the foundation for that integrity and that openness to be able to communicate with people based on the kind of those mental health principles that you touched on? Like that you have to be balanced and understand how to deal with the emotions of every day and circumstances around you in order to keep your integrity?
Absolutely. If you're acting on impulse, if you're acting without intention, if you're acting without purpose, then you're out of integrity, and probably there's going to be some mental health components with that as well. But this is why you hear me talk about meditation a lot, and a lot of spiritual practices around Buddhism and Taoism is when you're able to really make peace with who you are, everything becomes easier. Everything becomes easier because you're able to know your truth, speak your truth, live your truth. That's what I always say.
I like that, you even touched on it a little bit with the monogamous stuff about there is no one size fits all. There's no right or wrong answer. And I want to see what your perspective is on that on the meditation, because this is something I've like struggled with, where you always felt like, oh, it has to be complete silence, or you have to do these chants. And the more people I've talked to, even on this podcast, it's been like meditation can mean a lot of different things for different people. So how do you define it or talk through it with your clients?
I think when it comes to meditation, but also masculine and feminine dynamics in relationships, sexuality, everything, these are all energetic things that aren't meant to have words put to them. But as humans with prefrontal cortex, like I said, we need to be able to do it. So that's why you see these 45-minute guided meditations to do this and this and this. We're taking something that's spirit and we're turning it into science. And I understand why, because that's how we think as humans and that's how we receive things. But to answer your question, there are 100 ways to cut this cake. There are a lot of ways to meditate. And whatever is meaningful to you, the audience, each individual person is listening to the audience, that is how you can do it. As long as you're taking basic principles of slowing down your mind, bringing your awareness, whether it's to your body, whether it's to your environment, whether it's to something in the present moment, as long as you're slowing down the ruminating mind and you're coming back to presence, it really doesn't matter how to do it. Some of my teachers even have taught me around not to do daily sit-down meditations and to just go to the beach and people watch, but make sure that there's no analysis going on and just feeling in the body. What do I feel? Oh, the wind blowing. Okay, the smell of the ocean. Okay, there's a beautiful woman. Now my heart just jumped. Oh, there's a cute couple. I feel warm. Oh, look at that child. It's so sweet. And just like feeling all these things, that's the meditation. And that's a little bit more advanced because sometimes you need to do the guided meditations first to slow down the mind so you can get to that place. But it's really about slowing down the mind and being in full presence, allowing the visual colors to be a little more colorful, allowing the sounds to be a little more vibrant, allowing the touch to be a little bit more present. Coming back to more presence of the senses is really the name of the game. And there are 100 different meditation styles to take you there, whichever one really sings the most for you. And really what I've learned in my path is it'll probably evolve over time. There'll probably be one type of mindfulness meditation, which is counting, which is what I start off with. And then it moves into maybe more body scan type meditation, so I can be more present in my body. And then I might move into more energy work type meditations. So it can evolve over time. But as long as you're doing something to slow down the mind, be in presence, and be in your senses, you're on the right track.
So is the end goal of that just to get better at identifying the emotions themselves that you feel?
That's part of the goal. The end goal is to get out of the mind and into the body.
Okay.
That's the goal, is to get out of overanalysis, with our phones, with our heavy work schedules. This life is at a very fast pace that I don't have any science to back this up, but I believe that the human body was not designed for this much stimulation. And it's only going to get harder.
Right.
Technology increases. So the end goal is to get out of the analytical mind and get into the body. In the body is where our emotional intelligence lies. It's where intuition lies, and it's where instincts lie. So a good way to start is by connecting with your emotions. Absolutely, yes. But there's more to it than emotions. Underneath emotions is intuition and wisdom and other things as well. But a good way to start is to feel your emotions. But in general, I call it body intelligence to encompass all these things: the emotional intelligence, the intuition, and the masculine instinct for men, is connecting with our bodies and listening to the lights that go off in our body. We have so many sensations in our body, and we cut it off to be in our mind. So now the name of the game, the goal that you asked of, is to slow down the mind so we can reopen our ability to be curious and aware of what's going on in our body.
Do we, as current cultured humans, do we fail at this just because the stimulating mind stuff is so much easier, and you don't have to take, there's no effort to it? Is that why we kind of default to, well, I'll just play on my phone or look at my screens? Why do you think that is?
It's all about connection versus disconnection with self, with body. It's an interesting practice to see how many things fall into this category, and it is around emotions. So, for example, one thing I used to notice when I used to go out to bars and I started practicing this work is, like, every time maybe I don't find a woman and I don't get the intimacy I want, first thing that pops up in my mind is I want a cheeseburger. And think of the industry that's been built around that. Yeah. Because a certain emotion has been suppressed. So then disconnection comes. And then I noticed that another way I disconnect is I like to maybe create fantasy, like sports things, like visualize a basketball game or like a trade that's not going to happen and stuff. And sometimes I'll notice that when I'm connected with other humans, I'm in my body, I'm in my connection, none of that. And then something disconnects me. Maybe I get hurt emotionally. Maybe I'm tired or fatigued, maybe anything. And then all of a sudden I'm thinking about sports. I'm craving burgers. I'm like all of those things, wanting to go on YouTube. And honestly, I've done a lot of research on this, and it's just about connection versus disconnection. And connection meaning with our heart, with our spirit, with our feelings, with our deeper self, our inner state. And when we are, for whatever reason, hurt emotionally, or we want to run away from something emotionally and hide, we now have all these things: unhealthy food, screens, all these different things to disconnect. And really, and to summarize it, it's about connection versus disconnection, and they usually come together. For me, I see that when I'm watching YouTube, I'm eating shitty, I'm maybe watching porn, which I don't do anymore, but in the past, all these things come together. And when I'm being healthy, all of a sudden I feel good, my dating life is getting better, money's coming in, and I'm being a better coach. All these things come together: connection versus disconnection. And our society has created so many ways for us to disconnect, and it's become the default. Stick an iPad in front of your kid when they cry. You're teaching them how to disconnect.
Is that disconnection just a protection mechanism? You think like all that pain of that emotional, not necessarily trauma, but like that rejection, I don't want to deal with it, so I'm going to disconnect from that to go to this?
100%. It's okay. The disconnection is the way to avoid the emotion.
So does that go back to discipline where it's like hey, understand that that emotion came up, and then here's how, now that I've done my meditation, I've worked through these things, I know now how to deal with it and respond appropriately.
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. I think firstly, it's before discipline, it's knowledge.
Okay.
Unfortunately, none of this is taught in schools. None of this is taught. So, you know, so many people, you talk about a masculine thing. A masculine thing is really being able to see what's underneath the bullshit. And so many people just follow the that's how it is thing. I mean, even during times of COVID, oh, that's how it is. That's how it is. And in my opinion, you're really not a masculine man if you just follow along with the herd. So the first thing we need people to do is we need people to know that there are other options. We need people to be critical thinkers and realize that, okay, when something's not working for me, I need to investigate and I need to find solutions that do work for me. And then once those two things are taken care of, yes, it's discipline. It's making sure you do your meditations, making sure you do the emotional work. There are emotional practices you can do, making sure you're doing the heart opening work after a breakup as a man and a woman, anyone. Really important to make sure you're reopening your heart before you get in the next relationship. All these interstate things does require discipline and does require responsibility. And trust me, even with me, I'm an expert, and sometimes it can be very difficult to say I'm going to sit down and meditate as opposed to just pick it up and start watching. So I think a lot of these devices and systems and TVs and everything has really made it even harder for us to connect with this human part of ourselves. So we have to be even more disciplined and aware of the importance of it.
And I think it's important for people to hear that even experts like yourself struggle with it on a daily basis. Because it can seem like people have
Absolutely,
things.
we're all human.
Yeah, but it can seem like you have everything together, and it's important to realize that, even the people that are coaching others have the same struggles that you do. They just have a few more tools in their toolbox to deal with it. How do you define a high value man? I've noticed in some of your posts and your talks that you mentioned that. I just kind of want to hear your definition, because like we talked about, I think with that red pill culture, it can be completely based on how much money you have, like almost solely. So I want to hear what your definition of that is.
I'd actually like to read what I was pulled up earlier around what it means to be masculine, and I think that'll kind of tie into that. So what I believe is what it means to be masculine is I speak my truth and I live my truth. I have integrity with my words and actions. I'm stoic with presence and logical thought. I protect those who are vulnerable. I command respect and I give respect, and I enforce boundaries around respect for everyone. I facilitate inner freedom to our primal nature, and I'm emotionally attuned, and I live in a place of depth. So that's what I believe it is to be masculine. We're not talking about number of dollars in the bank. We're not talking about six pack. We're not talking about any of that. And when you ask me what it means to be a high value man, it's a trustable, courageous, powerful, yet loving leader. A high value man is a man who inspires. A high value man is a man who leads those more vulnerable than him. A high value man is a man who people can trust. I see a business leader, say business leader of a team of 200, let's say at a good company with a good culture. Let's say it's all positive. I see him, and then a tribal leader is the same thing. I've spent a lot of time with indigenous communities in my journey, and you see one man who 200 people rely on. And he doesn't have six figures in the bank, I can promise you that.
All right.
But I can tell you, people are fed, people's emotions are taken care of, women and children are taken care of. He's equally as high value to me as a CEO. And then if you have other CEOs who actually have a really unhappy workforce, their people are living poor lives, they have health issues, they're not able to spend time with their families, and this CEO is worth $15 million, a year. I don't consider him a high value man. A high value man is a man that makes the world a better place for people more vulnerable than him. Women, children, other men who are not as courageous and strong and powerful as he is. That to me is a high value man. A man who inspires devotion.
That's a really cool. I really like that definition. Because a lot of it talks about emotions, which is kind of contrary to what a lot of people think masculinity would even mean. So when you talk about those indigenous tribes, are the people under that leader almost using like, do they use them for emotional support as well?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these indigenous tribes are so spiritually focused that this
Yeah.
actually that's their bread and butter for life. Like that's 7 days a week. But can you rephrase the question,
Yeah, I
or
don't.
just repeat the question?
I guess is it because you talked about like femininity having like being in their emotions. I guess part of it was just a question of like, does being an emotional support system help? Does that define part of being masculine as well?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So the fact of the matter is, even though feminine women are more emotion driven creatures. Men and masculine men have emotions too. There's nobody out there who can have a full tank by being emotionless. There's talks of stoicism, there's talks of this, talks of that. There's very few people who can really get by being. There are some computer minds out there, but that's rare. And I think that if we are going to protect and provide for our women or children, that doesn't just mean putting food on the table and a roof over your head. Women need to be provided for emotionally as well. And I think when a man is able to resolve, the difference between a man and a woman is we operate in solution-based ways, and women are just always they're always in the moment. So as a man, when you're able to work through your own emotions in safe spaces, I'm actually not someone who believes that you can to be emotional in front of your partner. I actually believe through a lot of the masculine feminine work I've done that most women will lose at a subconscious level. She'll tell you, baby, I want to see your emotions. It's so attractive, so beautiful. I love you more for it. 5 years later, you wonder why she's nagging you all the time. It's because it's very unnerving for a woman to have other emotions in her space. It needs to be all about her. And I don't mean that to demean women in any way. This is a biological thing that's been there for 2,000 years. So there's nothing but love in my heart when I say it. But women are emotional creatures, and men have paid the price for centuries by trying to be emotional, and that's why men aren't emotional. Because as a man, I can only speak for myself, but I've seen this with many other men. Is I would rather be respected and have attraction than be loved, and that's a tough pill to swallow. Not to say I don't want to be loved. Of course, I want to be loved, but it's more important that I'm respected and that there's attraction present. So when a man is crying in front of his woman, all of a sudden she's like, oh, okay, now I need to get in my masculine and hold him. And a lot of women are willing to do that. They love their boyfriend, they love their husband, but then the respect goes away at a very subconscious level. The attraction goes away at a very subconscious level, not at a conscious level. So therefore, men still need to move our emotions. We still need to do it. And that's why my industry exists, men's work, men's circles. So we get this, we move through our emotions, we clear our emotions. And when we clear our emotions, we can come to inner peace. And we do that in front of men who can handle it, and we won't pay a price for it. Whereas if you cry and release it in front of your woman, you'll pay the price. Maybe it becomes a sexless relationship. Maybe all of a sudden she's getting more irritable because now she can't express her emotions. So as men, we need to express it, but we need to express it in safe spaces for us where we don't pay a cost for it. Because I believe anecdotally that the reason why this stigma of men can't be emotional is because we've just paid the price one too many times of being emotional. So you learn that there's a cost to it. And when we're able to do it with other strong yet vulnerable men who are not going to make us pay a cost for it, that's how we can move through it. By all means, men who are listening, you do have to move through your emotions. Otherwise, it's just going to lead to repetitive thoughts.
Is that where is that why you kind of created some of these men's groups? You mentioned men's circles. Is it to just to create that safe space, and maybe talk a little bit about these groups that you've created? Is it just to let other guys have, hey, here's people that can listen to you who have been through it and can offer
Yeah.
some support?
Yeah, so I have a couple of different things that I've been working with. So the men's circles I speak to, those are free community events I have in 5 different countries: Dominican Republic, Colombia, Brazil right now, Argentina. Some of them had them in Mexico and the U.S. Some are still on, some are off now. But these are just spaces for men to come, be vulnerable, speak at a deeper level, share at a deeper level. And in brotherhood, there's a lot of value in just that in itself. There's a lot of value in just that in itself. And then I do have a couple of 2 virtual programs, which are also in brotherhood and also that. but those are 6-month transformational programs where it's not just about being vulnerable, but we do the work for you. Like in the masculinity program, the Masculine Mastery Method, we teach you how to actually understand your truth, own your truth, speak your truth, to live with courage instead of being weak, to own your power, and to own your leadership, and to create broader awareness, and all these things of what it is to be masculine. So that I actually teach. I have educational videos, I have practices, because I'm all about retraining the mind, the nervous system, the emotions, and the physical body. So practices to retrain it. And then in Brotherhood, I coach and help people. So there's some which are just spaces to just be vulnerable, and there are others which are more transformational, where you're actually reprogramming, like I said, your mind, your nervous system, your emotions, and your physiology to be that man, to take away the conditioning that made you a pushover, a nice guy, and to find the masculinity that you were born with.
Is it men of all across the spectrum that are part of these groups and in the same spaces? Does that make sense?
What do you mean by spectrum?
Well, I could see where some people could be intimidated, like, hey, you may have CEOs and then also like young guys just out of high school or college that want to understand this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like age spectrum, diversity spectrum, like just all types of guys in the same spaces.
Yeah. So in the free circles, it's anybody, just because we're all men and we all need to be here. But in the transformational programs, I'm mostly working with executive level folks, doctors, executives, etc. Because you're right, there are different languages. One thing that's, there's so many spaces for people with addiction issues and all that. And for me, I want to keep the space specific. So for me, it's more what I'm focusing on at this point, and I would like to expand to different demographics, but at this point, on people who are, C-level, director level, senior manager level, doctors, et cetera, and those type of roles, management role, leader roles, who've created that superficial success. They've made the money, maybe they had their beautiful life, whatever, but they're still feeling like something is missing because they're not being that man. Maybe their wife is actually, it's not what it is, what he thought it would be, because she's nagging and complaining all the time because he's not fully in his power. Maybe he's making a great salary, but he's not actually feeling like he has the voice of the CFO. He's actually just listening to somebody else and pulling the strings and pretending to be a leader, but not leading from his innate core, not leading from his innate masculinity. So people who have achieved the superficiality, but something's still missing, that's who I work with.
You talk a lot about like leading through masculinity. How do you work with guys that are in charge of maybe a large organization or any type of people manager on building that culture around that? Or like, does that make sense?
100%. It's a core value. What we want, masculinity has always been tied to leadership, but for me, it's important that it's inspirational and loving leadership. Like, as part of what I'm creating, let's say the evolution of masculinity is it's being a leader, but it's being an inspirational and a loving leader. And that means for family, for wife, for kids, and that means for business. And I have had clients who've been, a VP of sales and teams of 50, 60. And when, you can be a power driver, or you can be a leader. There's multiple ways to lead. You can lead through inspiration. And in my opinion, the real leader is, like, I think, especially because I've been in industries like hedge funds and management consulting, those are outside of law, the most men's club industries, boys club, men's club industries of like, hey, don't be a pussy. You're sneezing, you're hacking away, you're sick, you got a sore throat at work. And it's like, hey, I want to take the afternoon off. And literally they say, don't be a pussy. Like, that's not what we want in terms of leadership. We don't want pile drivers. We don't want that. I believe that, unlike what masculinity in the corporate world has said, where to be the best leader, you need to be the loudest, most powerful voice in the room. I think to be a great leader, you need to be the quietest voice in the room. I think you need to be someone who just creates so much space for people to step into their capabilities and powers. And that's what I teach my men who are in these business roles. Is they come to me like, oh my God, I'm working 16-hour days. My calendar's full. I'm stressed out. Stuff's not getting done. I'm like, what about your managers? What about your associates? What are they doing? Yeah, but he can't do this. He can't do that. And that's where the perfectionism comes in, for everything we learn in college. And when you're able to actually say, you know what, I'm going to bring the best out of these people. I'm going to let them bring their creativity. I'm going to let them bring their intelligence and their skills and create this amazing art from the amalgamation of these 50 intelligent people who freaking spend a lot of money to go to college and learn and all that. And your voice is the quietest voice. You're just the vision. Don't get me wrong. You still create the vision, and then you give the tools, but you let everyone thrive. Guess what? I've had clients who've come back and been like, oh my God, our revenue has jumped and my calendar is half empty. I don't know what to do with my day. Because leadership is a very, very simple thing. Leadership is not about doing 50 tasks. Leadership is about personality management, creating a vision, creating trust, and then allowing others to flow in their genius. And it's the same way you lead in a relationship. When you allow your woman to be in her full creativity, love, compassion, whatever it is, the relationship is going to thrive. So much of how even though masculinity is what we talk, I see it as quite synonymous with leadership, but it's a form of leadership that I think has quite rarely existed.
No, that's pretty cool. Because I've always thought that, leadership, like you touched on, leadership and management are very different. You want people to do something, not because you're telling them to, but because they actually want to do it, because they're buying into that vision. Is it,
Exactly.
do you think that by representing that and being within our masculinity, it just kind of creates that inspiration, or is there more to it?
There's more to it, but it's a big part of it. So
Right.
before you don't want to put the cart before the horse. You don't want to be nice and loving and care about people being happy in their mental health and that if you're not capable yourself.
Mm,
The first thing your subordinates at work are going to look for is how capable is this guy?
right.
If you're messing up, if you're not listening to people, if you're not, your employee asks for something, you don't do it, you don't execute on it, they need your help and assistance, or maybe controls in the processes, structure in the processes, and it's missing, they're not going to trust your leadership. So before you can lead with like compassion, love, all those things, sweet things, you got to be capable. People have to trust that you can get it done. And that's the masculine piece is, I know I'm talking about being a loving leader, but the leader part comes before the loving part. You got to be capable. You got to be trustworthy. You got to be someone who people are like, wow, okay, he's leading us to the water. We're in the desert and he's leading us to the water. And there's no one I'd rather follow to the water because this guy can get shit done. So you need to create that. And that's all masculinity. Being capable, again, speaking your truth, being in your power, taking risks, just leading people in a way where you're not just stuck in the same place, but they can see business growth, they can see career growth, they can see that they need to trust your capability and your awareness as a man. Then once that is in place, you do more of the, let's say, collaboration-based, community-based, culture-based things. But before you can start with culture, you have to start with capability. And let's just talk about kind of where the state of businesses are at. As a former management consultant, I've seen a lot of businesses. In the past, it was overly focused on just the bottom line, just no matter what, bottom line, however we need to get there, hands dirty, no company culture. And that still exists in some places. But then there's another thing that exists is company culture first, where now there's hiring practices coming into play that's not looking at skills and capability, but looking at some other things. And that is equally as detrimental. You need to have the ability to be a successful leader while also being a compassionate leader. But it can't be either or.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So do you think that it's almost gone too far the other way of like focus on the culture, or is it that we need to have a better understanding of how to mend those two things?
When it comes to socialization of the Western culture, everything goes the other way, right? I mean, I'm here leading a part of the men's movement, and I'm afraid that the men's movement's going too far the other way. Like I told you
Right.
earlier, the women's movement went too far the other way, and now the men's movement's going too far the other way. And that's just how we do things. I can't tell you what. I can't tell you what. But to answer your question about the business thing, it absolutely is. Like this is probably going to be the most controversial thing on here, but with a lot of the identity-based hiring practices, that's just now. Guess what? America became a superpower by a strong country with strong defense and respect by being capable as a country, in its corporations, in its businesses. And if we're going to trade away capability for compassion, then we will lose as a country, as a business, whatever it is. You will lose if you're going to trade away capability for compassion. And on the other side of things, if you're all capability and no compassion, you'll nuke everyone, and that's not cool either, right? And in the business things, you'll have a bunch of people not healthy, family issues, all that, and you'll have them working till midnight, and that's not cool either. So I do think that capability needs to meet compassion, and I think that 20 years ago we were highly in the capability with very little compassion. And now, I don't want to say it's every business, because it is a split divide, but you have a lot which are so compassion driven. Again, identity, hiring, all of those things. Guess what? You'll be a great company culture, but you won't be a company for very long. So, at that point, you'll just be culture. So I think that there's a balance there between capability and I think that when it comes, you have to look at who you are, right? If you're a family, I think you want to put culture over capability, if that makes sense. Like, you want to put love over goals, so to speak. But if you're a business, you probably want to put capability over, has a little bit of a higher, because you only live as a business with revenue and you die, but without it. So but I do think that maybe it's more of a 70-30 principle, or an 80-20, or a 60-40 principle, rather than just all black and white.
What's one piece of advice that you'd want someone listening to take away from everything you talked about today?
If you're feeling lost, whether it's unhappy in a relationship, unhappy about a lack of relationship, unhappy about your status, empowerment level at work, your freedom at work, unhappy with your health, if you're unhappy with something, you absolutely have the power to do something about it. I went from being disabled to now having a men's movement across multiple countries, doing what I love, dating who I want, all of it. But it's not going to be easy. And it's not going to be the hard they tell you to be hard. It's, if you're willing to be introspective, if you're willing to really, really look at who am I, who am the man I am, or the woman I am, how am I showing up? And you start to live your life from really, really, really looking at the inside and the why of your actions, as opposed to what the outside is doing to you. And you start realizing that if you get it right within yourself, your possibilities become far more limitless. So if you're lost right now, if you're feeling stuck right now, realize that you have the power, but the power starts, no one's going to come and help you. The power starts with looking in the mirror and working on yourself, the way you think, the way you feel, the actions you take, and bringing clarity to all of that.
That's awesome, man. How do people find you or find out more about the movements that you have?
Yeah, so if you want to learn more about Men of Mastery, you can go to www.menofmastery.us, and then you can follow me at Karl Lashkari on all social platforms.
Karl, I can't thank you enough, man. This was very insightful for me, and I think it will be for the listeners as well. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Jordan. Always happy to share the message.